Yeah, so this is actually the first podcast I've ever been a part of. So
Nice.
this is gonna be fun.
How are you feeling? How are you feeling about it?
Oh yeah, super anxious.
Oh yeah.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of RTAF Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Norris. Thank you for being here.
The sponsor for this week's episode is
my Patreon.
That's right. You can find my Patreon at patreon.com/RTAF podcast. There you will find different subscription levels and tiers of engagement. And I got to shout out a new patron this week. We're up to 6, y'all. And that patron is Observatory System. Find him at Observatory System on Instagram. He's out here making paintings, abstract flow stuff. Cool shit, man. Thanks for your subscription. If you subscribe, this is part of the deal. At any tier, when you subscribe, I give you a shout out and one social media handle of your choice. Anyway, this week's guest is Matt Mills, who is a digital artist, software engineer, website designer, and all-around cool dude. He's been listening to the podcast, I think, since day one. I really dig his art. It's abstract, digital, very cool stuff. And Matt and I talk about his history into making art, his time spent at Disney for a bit working on a video game, and what it takes to make a video game. I think sometimes, I used to think this way, I'll say that. I used to think that, video games, like whatever, they just threw it together. And then, of course, you just think about it for 2 more seconds and you're like, oh wait, that probably takes a lot of people doing a lot of concept art, a lot of coding, a lot of debugging and figuring out problems and storyboarding, all these kinds of things. We get into that in this episode. We talk about Matt's company, Art Grab, which is a platform that connects visual artists with musicians, record labels, and agencies that are in need of artwork. Basically, you can license your artwork through this website that Matt and some other fellow artists have built. We, of course, touch on NFTs. We also talk about where ideas might come from, Matt's routine, and several other topics.
So let's strap in, y'all.
Get ready,
Blast off.
because he's here. Matt Mills, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
This is good to get to talk about, all sorts of stuff. I think, I want to preface this by, I'm not a full-time artist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people know that or not, but, I'm a full-time software engineer.
Nice.
And art is something that I've always loved and enjoyed doing.
Right.
And something I do every day almost, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not my sort of primary income.
Right. Yeah. I didn't know that until I was, doing a little research and went to your website, and on the about page, I was surprised. I was surprised to learn that, you have a day job, like a, software engineer. It kind of makes sense a little bit because, you make digital art, and I personally don't know how you do it. Like technically, I mean,
Yeah.
I can see how you would carve away some time at the end of each day, but yeah, it kind of, those two things, do they dovetail together for you? Does the software engineering inform how you make the art?
It does. I mean, they go surprisingly well together.
Mm-hmm.
Just the creation of art and programming, you both, for both of those things, you get into the same kind of flow state when you're creating.
Yeah.
And so for me, from that standpoint, it's very similar. But also, like from a young age, I've always been into computers, right? I've always been on the computer, either playing games or, figuring out how to code. And that sort of led me into just, I was on the computer. I saw other people like creating artwork, digital art, Photoshop stuff, people just Photoshopping things. And it sort of got me interested. I was always the type of kid that would like download software.
Nice.
Not legally, right?
What were you using back in the day to do that, to download?
All sorts of like message boards and BitTorrent,
Yeah.
And, that's where I got my first copy of Photoshop, my first copy of Maya, right?
Sweet.
And so just being on the computer all the time sort of led me into trying all these different applications. I got into Flash because of my background. Like I went to college for computer science. And so I was, programming all the time. And, it got me, I sort of figured out how to get this software, right?
Yeah.
Just from other people, your friends, like they download this cool stuff. And you're like, oh, wow, I can do that.
Yeah.
And so I just started poking around and downloading things and, got me into Photoshop and Maya. And it just took off from there. Like once I had those things and figured out that I could create something from nothing, like I've never been a huge like painter or sculptor, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've always had this like creative bone in me where, when I was young, I was always just doodling, right?
Totally.
On my books, you'd have like the textbooks with like the brown paper bag covers on them. In elementary school when I was just drawing just like weird shit, like all the time.
Totally.
During class. But it never really went past that until sort of after college when, I had free time, when I was younger. I didn't have a ton. It felt like, art really wasn't something that I was into as much. Like I said, I was always kind of creative.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of other things going on. So I never really had the time to explore art and creating.
Right. What other things were you into as a kid or a young man, like besides like the computer software engineering and figuring out those programs? It seems like, I saw that you worked with a lot of musicians. Are you super into music? Is that like a gateway to creating art for you?
Yeah, I mean that's probably the gateway drug to me, sort of exploring all different types of creativity, right? It's sort of the first thing that I remember just making me feel something, it just, and even to today, it's sort of what drives my artwork, right? I've always got music on when I'm creating. Either, if I'm at work, when I'm programming, I have music on. When I'm, creating artwork, I have music on. It's just sort of there all the time. And, I love that I can sort of put different types of music to sort of put me in a different mood, right? To take me to a different place, right?
Totally.
I've never been good at creating my own music.
Yeah.
I sort of dabbled. Yeah. But it just never quite clicked for me, But yeah, music was big as far as, just listening to it, consuming it, all types. When I was younger, it was sort of grew up in like the 90s. So there was a lot of like grunge, hip hop, like, Tupac and Biggie.
Yeah.
I was big into grunge, like Pearl Jam, Rage Against the Machine, Tool. And then I got into classic rock pretty deep, like all the good stuff like Pink Floyd and, Led Zeppelin and
sure.
Took me to the Grateful Dead. And like, I've just taken all these journeys, right? Because it's all different music that has sort of fueled different points to my life, right?
Yeah.
Depending on what I was into or, even took me to different places, right, that I didn't even know were were out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, music has been definitely a big piece of just everything in my life.
Nice.
But, you know, when I was a kid, I was also, like I said, I wasn't really into art as much.
Right.
There was a lot of video games, right? Playing Nintendo, computer games, things like that. But I was also a pretty high level soccer player
Nice.
from a very young age, like 3 or 4. I started playing soccer all the way up until I was out of high school. I got through high school and was like, you know, I've been doing this so much. Like I played on a club team. I played in high school. That was like what I did, you know. I felt like it just consumed my entire life up until that point. And after that, I was like, you know, I'm going to college. I'm done. You know, I'm going to go have fun, do whatever, and just sort of get that, you know, behind me and just sort of try to live with a little less discipline, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So you're in college. Was there any point or like any specific instance or story that you could point to that kind of drew you into the idea of making art?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to sort of like music and partying and just hanging out, right?
Yeah.
Like I had done a lot of that in high school.
Sure.
I'm not gonna lie. But then when you get to college, you're sort of on your own, right?
Totally.
You're with new people, new experiences. And, you know, it just sort of leads you down a different path of looking at things in a different, you know, in a different light. Right.
Totally.
And so even in college, like I was never created anything, you know, it was all just sort of going through the motions, partying. It took me like almost 6 years to get out of college, right? Because I was having a bit too much fun.
Yeah.
And you know, like I said, it took me like 5.5, 6 years. I had a great time, right?
Right.
And I think that's sort of kind of what that period of your life is for, right?
Definitely.
Have fun, explore different things, figure things out.
Yeah. Get to know who you are.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's sort of what I did, right? And, you know, I got out and sort of, you know, just kept on the path of like what I was on, you know, and what I knew. Like growing up, I grew up in the suburbs, right? Like standard middle class upbringing.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's parents sort of worked at like a big corporation, you know, they're all sort of like middle managers and whatnot. And, you know, and to me, that's just kind of all I knew. And sort of when I got out of college, that's sort of the path that I took, right? Just got a job in tech. I actually grew up in Pennsylvania for most of my younger life, like high school and college.
Oh, nice.
And so once I graduated, I moved down to Austin and, you know, got a tech job, sort of where all the, the tech jobs were at the time, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And now they're coming back there, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty crazy how Austin is just, you know, continuing to grow since I've been here. You know, I've been here almost, I mean, it's been over 15 years.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow. Nice.
So it's, you know, I've sort of seen it change, but yeah, just got a standard tech job. And really it was at that point when I started creating.
That's cool.
Because I had this like kind of boring job, right, during the day.
Yeah.
And I lived alone. Like I didn't really know that many people down here. So I would go back to my apartment, like a 1-bedroom apartment, sitting around. You know, initially I played video games, you know, just to kill time, right? We were either at the bar hanging out or playing video games, you know,
For sure.
Doing stuff that, you know, 20-year-olds do.
Right.
And it was actually that sort of led me into figuring out that I could create things. There's this video game called Unreal Tournament.
Yep.
And the producers of that put out the software to where you could sort of modify your levels and your characters. And somehow I figured it out. I think somebody I was hanging out with sort of showed me that you could do this.
So
right?
it was like, so it's like open source kind of, and is that the basic concept there?
Yeah, even to today, like the Unreal Engine, you can just download it for free and like make your own games in it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of digital artist friends talk about Unreal and how they're just all about it.
It's super powerful, and it's pretty awesome that the guys behind it sort of just released that for anyone to use and build games, or you can build anything in it now, right? Visualizations, like VR, all types of stuff.
Sure, yeah.
Back then it was a little more rudimentary, and crude, and just sort of had to like hack around to figure things out, which to me was like super fun. That was like what I was into, sort of taking apart software and figuring out how to put it back together and create new things. But that sort of led me into, hey, we can make our own levels for this game. So we download Maya, we download Photoshop, and we just start like making crazy shit, all night. Like get home from work at 5, we'd be up till 4 or 5 the next morning, just creating stuff just all night, right?
That's right.
It was like that spark. And once I figured that out, like I didn't really play video games after that.
You started making them?
Made stuff.
Yeah.
Like not even games as much. Like games was the gateway to me getting these tools. But then after that, it was just creating all sorts of weird things. And, I found this community on Deviant called Deviant Art.
Right. Yeah.
Have you heard of that?
Yeah, definitely.
It was much bigger sort of back then.
Back in the golden days of the internet.
Yeah. A lot of the communities were like that, where it felt new, exciting, right? Yeah. Everyone was kind of just making new stuff. Like you'd never seen like just people making crazy 3D renders.
Right.
It's so like you take it for granted today. Like you scroll on Instagram or Twitter, and it's just like every other person's posting like a 3D render of something.
Right.
Back then it was crazy because you knew how much it really took to get that thing made, right? You had to model it, you had to texture it by hand, add all the lighting, and there's like so much shit that you had to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then once I found that community, it just like took me off in a whole new direction of like I spent all my time outside of work, either on DeviantArt, creating stuff, talking to artists. Like I'd never really had that connection, that type of connection before.
For sure.
And it was, very sort of uplifting.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm curious about kind of like your day to day and your habits. Do you have any tricks or routines that get you in the creative mindset? I read on your bio on your website that you kind of just come home after work and you make art. Or if you, I guess maybe, there's a lot, maybe this is like 4 questions in one, but maybe you're staying home now because of COVID. I don't know, but yeah, just maybe talk about like a routine or two that helps you feel creative.
Yeah, for sure. So like if you look at my Instagram feed, it's all art, right?
Right.
But if you look at my calendar for every day, it's very different. So, I have a family, I have 2 kids, I have a full-time day job. So I have to have like every day is almost the same for me, right?
Yeah.
There's a very sort of rigid routine that I go through every day.
For sure.
For better or worse, right? I mean, it is what it is. And so
yeah, I mean, I think routine is helpful. Like healthy rhythms are kind of key in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I really think that, sometimes I get a little down about that, right? Because I'm just going through these motions, all these things that I feel like I have to do throughout the day, to that little sort of slice of the day where I get to sort of create art. Mm-hmm. But, it makes it that more sweet, honestly. But like if we could go through like an average day for me, it's basically wake up like 6:30, get the kids ready, eat breakfast, now that I'm working from home, I go straight into work pretty much.
Yeah.
And you know, when I'm working from home, I would, have to drive into Austin, right? So that'd be like 30, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
But now just kind of work straight all the way through until, 5 or 6, have dinner, kids, hang out with kids for a few hours, put the kids to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of that's when, I get sort of my time to do whatever, right? Create, or it's usually creating or working on side projects or, businesses or whatever.
Yeah.
I've got like, honestly, too many things probably going on at the same time, but sort of that time, in the evenings is what I carve out to do anything that I really need to do or want to do during the day. It's usually, I want to either create something, artwork, the stuff that I post on Instagram. I try to do that every day because it's such a release for me, honestly.
Yeah.
After having, all those responsibilities through the day. And, my job is somewhat, programming is creative. It's very mentally draining though.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And for me, towards the end of the day, I'm already tired. And being able to sort of turn on like a different mode. And it goes back to music, really. Like if I sit down, I put headphones on, I listen to something, it's usually a trigger for me to sort of get back into that sort of creative flow, right?
Yeah.
And just the repetition, like over the past, 5 or 6 years of doing that constantly, consistently, really, every day, it's not a chore, like for me. Like when I get to that period where it's time for me to create, like I'm hyped up, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Like it's been a long day. I'm tired. This is like, I've heard other artists, on here talk about like, it's like a meditation, right? It's kind of a release of some sort. And that's truly what it is for me, Yeah. I don't do any like sketching or preparation. It's really just sit down, put the headphones on and just let it go.
Yeah.
A lot of my artwork, if you look at it, if you scroll my Instagram feed, it's very similar, right? It's geometric, it's abstract, it's a little psychedelic. So there's kind of a pattern there.
Sure.
And for me, that helps, right? Because I have a limited time to create each day, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm sitting trying to figure out what to do for 30 minutes and then sort of poking at it for a little bit, like that eats up my entire amount of time that I have. So
right.
It's like I got to jump head first in.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. There's something about having constraints or deadlines even. Like I've noticed I have a deadline right now on a painting. And by the way, my life is very different than yours. I have a dog, and that's about where my responsibilities end. And but I'm coming to learn, like slowly over time, that like having a routine or some, framework at least for your day, and making sure you're hitting the things that you need to hit at the right time. And when you're done, you're done. And when you start, like you were just saying, it's super important that you just start, And I think that before I really was just like a full-time artist, the part of the dream was that like, oh, I'll have all day to make art. And then you sort of realize that, that even with the small amount of responsibility that I have, things still come up and you still have to do kind of like logistical or administrative stuff. And it's good to to separate those things, you know? And
Yep.
so that when you step up to create something or sit down, there it is, and you just have your time carved out. You're mentioning music. Is it, yeah, I have to agree with you on that. Like, it's so, there's something when when you just hear a beat or like a song that you've loved for so long that just like zones you in. So what kind of you kind of mentioned some bands and artists earlier. Who are you really into right now?
So, I mean, it's still all over the place. Like I said, depending on what mood I'm in, or, um, I think for me, when I'm creating, it's a lot of sort of electronica music, stuff like Taiko, along that lines of, doesn't have to be instrumental, but, very sort of fluid and it just sort of lets your mind wander, right?
Yeah.
It's not directing you in a certain place, but it sort of just puts you in the right, mindset, or it's like a vibe, right?
Yeah.
For your mind. So it's mostly like electronic music right now, like wave, which is kind of like trap and electronic sort of mixed.
Sure.
It's just got these like real funky beats, that just like for me, if you look at my artwork, like a lot of that style, I think comes through in it, because that's sort of, Taiko, Scott Hansen, sort of the guy behind Taiko. He's a visual artist as well.
Right.
If you look at a lot of his stuff, you can kind of see comparisons in some of the stuff that I do, where it's very geometric, and I think there's something there in that music that like is driving that.
Yeah.
It's very strange to sort of try to describe it, right? Because you're just sort of in the moment and doing things, and it just sort of like, you just go off and create sort of on that, same frequency.
Yeah. Do you have any visual artists who influenced or maybe inspired you, or still do?
Yeah, again, I'm kind of all over the place here, because I started off in 3D art, making sort of high resolution models and very sort of Pixar-esque type things,
right?
Which is very different from the style that I create now. But I still have a love for sort of all of those things, as well as traditional artists like you. Like, I have your painting right behind me that I commissioned.
Thank you.
And,
by the way, again.
Yeah, of course, and that's to me it's kind of like the music, where I like all these different styles.
Yeah.
It's I'm not going to shout out any one person, right? Because it's sort of a melding of all of these people, I think, and where that inspiration comes from. For me, it's all over the place, right? If you look at, a lot of my work is used for album covers, and I think that comes from my inspiration from music.
Yeah.
Growing up, looking at these vinyl covers like Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and sort of all these like really classic, iconic pieces of artwork, right? That are on vinyl covers. And if you look at a lot of my stuff now, I think a lot of that comes, like, people have compared my work to like the Journey album covers, right?
Yeah.
And totally. I think it totally works. Like, I'm not sitting down taking that as reference or inspiration, but
right.
I think just growing up seeing those things, they are things that sort of stuck in my mind as, wow, this is badass, or this is cool, so cool. And then once I actually started creating myself, right, those things just start to come out, right? Because you have like a language, like a visual language that you can really tap into, like,
things
that you love just over the years. And for me, I'm not young anymore, right? I'm middle age, and so I've had a lot of time to sort of absorb all of these things, have a lot of different experiences, and they just sort of come together into. I think the artwork that I create now is just really a melding of all of those things, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's got these sort of retro video game vibes, album covers, all sorts of other like psychedelic, trippy type, imagery, things that I've just over the years been drawn to.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've just taken pieces of those and tried to push them into, something new.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's kind of what the artist is, right? Is you go around, you live your life, you absorb all these things, and then you reformulate them when you have a blank canvas or a guitar in front of you or whatever. You're drawing on your experience, and you're sort of reorganizing all the things that you have experienced to sort of point to what it's like to be experiencing life as like an individual, yourself. But have you ever thought about like where ideas come from, or like maybe like what's your overall take on just the fact that we're having an experience all the time? I know that's a pretty broad question, so.
Yeah, man, we're getting deep here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you can sort of sit and ponder on, right?
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, right? That's an idea in and of itself. To me,
yeah, totally.
it's like,
never ends.
Yeah. Sort of ideas for creating artwork for me, to get specific. Like I said, I don't really wait for that idea. It's more of just an in the moment type thing. I think where I've sort of struggled in the past is pinpointing those ideas. Like if I have a client who is wanting to do something very specific, right? I can sit down and sort of sketch out, designs or whatever you want to call those, ideas for things, all day, but I have no idea where those come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's like that point of when I'm doing something, you're not conscious of where that thought is coming from, right? Because you're doing something. But, I think, it goes back to your experiences, like things that you've done. How else would you know to have an idea about something, right?
Yeah.
That's something before that had somehow like put that seed in your mind somewhere.
Yeah.
Kind of like Inception, right?
Yeah.
You're just having these millions of thoughts sort of going into your mind, sort of planting all these seeds over the years. And then sometime later in the future, you come back to it when you're sort of tasked with doing something where you're just sitting thinking, right? I know a lot of people say they'll just get ideas, right? You're in the shower and like something pops up. I'm like, oh, wow, that's crazy. Where did that come from?
Right.
But, I think it's just sort of, all of your experiences and things that you've sort of thought about in the past, just sort of sitting there, right? Churning, and, maybe they're interacting with each other without you knowing, sort of combining.
Yeah.
And then when you come back to sort of pick one of those ideas out, they're sort of there, right?
Yeah. Well, that was that. Yeah, man, that was a great illustration of that. I think you explained that really well. And yeah, I think that's kind of how it is. There's some sort of like something had to cause that. What it is, we may never be conscious of or aware of. but there's so many. To me, it's. I feel like thoughts or thought energy, whatever you want to call it, brain electricity, it just happens, and our conscious mind picks up on it, and sometimes it'll parse it into like a visual representation, or for other people it's words, or for other people it might be a feeling. But I think we're picking up on all that, maybe subconsciously, all the time. And yeah, I love the analogy of like the seeds and like things just growing, and then you kind of become aware of it again, and you're like, oh, that's a tree, wow, and it's this fully formed idea. I think that was a great illustration. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and one thing, I don't do this, but I think it would probably be useful. And I know a lot of people that do this.
Mm-hmm.
They write these things down, right, as they're experiencing. You know, people that journal a lot,
Yeah,
they say that this is like hugely beneficial. This is sort of something that, you know, I've wanted to do, and I've kind of like dabbled a little bit sometimes, but, you know, I think if you're consistent about that, sort of gathering those ideas, that sort of even plants those seeds even further.
yeah,
Sort of as you have them, or after you experience something, you know, you journal about it, write it down.
mm-hmm.
It cements those sort of thoughts a little bit more.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who do like morning journaling, just kind of when they wake up. Sometimes it'll be about dreams, other times it'll just be about what has happened recently. And I mean, I gotta say that I don't do it very much, like you, but I think that writing things down really helps kind of organize your mind, I guess. And it's super helpful tool, because there's a lot of things rattling around in there for everybody. And I think it's definitely like a mentally healthy practice to do. But like as an artist, I also kind of get the feeling that like maybe like my journaling is painting, and your journaling is sitting down at the end of the day and creating awesome digital artwork. So it's kind of little snapshots of points or weeks, days in your life that you can look back on, and, you know, maybe it'll spark a memory of like, oh, this is kind of where I was at then.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and to me, like if I scroll back on my Instagram feed and I sort of look at that artwork, I can tell, you know, if there's a lot of dark imagery for, you know, a few weeks, it's like, you know, I was going through a rough patch there, and just a lot of the artwork I was creating was darker.
Yeah.
Right. It's pretty crazy how to sort of have that history there, Instagram, good or bad, you know, people can sort of discuss that or whatever. But for me, it's been, you know, it's been hugely beneficial as far as
Sure.
sort of documenting my work. And like you said, that's a journal, right? Those are things that I've sort of created, you know, almost every day. And I can go back and sort of see, sort of pull out like, what was my mindset back then? What did I comment on this? You know, did I make some like snarky comment in the description, or was it all happy? Did I have like a cool quote? Was I feeling inspired? That sort of thing. So it's been like a good record, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned kind of looking at that and seeing like more lighter times, more darker times. Do you have any strategies or ways that you handle adversity, or just things getting kind of tough?
Yeah. And so for me, because I have so much going on,
Yeah.
I struggle with this a lot, you know, honestly, because, and this is something I've learned sort of fairly recently, that, you know, anxiety can come out of just having too many things to do, right?
Yeah.
You've filled your life with things, and then you don't really have enough time to focus on each one. And then you feel like, oh man, I should be focusing on this. and then you just continue on that cycle, right? It's just a cycle of sort of getting down on yourself and
Yeah.
feeling like you're in a bad place when you're not really, you know what I mean? Like this is just sort of a bad patch. One thing I would say is like, if you can talk to somebody, therapist or whatever, like for me, that has been like hugely beneficial.
For sure.
Just sort of having someone who's like not in your close circle that you can talk to. I know, especially sort of like during the pandemic, this has been huge. A lot of people have been struggling with this, and you hear from therapists where like they have so many clients now just because everyone's struggling with, whether it be, like for me, because I'm always home, I can always kind of work.
Yeah.
Your employer tends to sort of take advantage of that, slacking you at 9:30 at night saying, hey, can you look at this? And, it just leads to your time getting eaten up, doing things that you don't necessarily want to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But, like I said, talk to somebody if you can. Like for me, that has been hugely beneficial. Just having somebody to sort of guide you a little bit, saying sometimes you can just step back, notice how you're feeling, right? If you're feeling super anxious or bummed out or whatever, you probably need to take a step back, right?
Yeah.
And like not do what you're about to go do or get off social media for a bit or something,
Right.
sort of, and just be very conscious of sort of the things that you're doing, and just have a look, right? And for me, it's really just sort of look at what I'm doing. Like, am I trying to do too many things during the day? Am I trying to sort of, have I taken on too much?
Yeah.
Do I need to step back from anything? It's really just being mindful of the things that you're doing and recognizing sort of the feelings. Like for me, there's a lot of sort of anxious feelings. Like I know now that I know how to like detect it.
Yeah.
That is a trigger for me to say, okay, why am I feeling like this? Whether I'm getting like, I feel warm or hot, or, I'm tapping my leg like really fast,
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, has different sort of symptoms, but what has been pretty cool for me is to be able to detect those things. Right. And that's like a trigger to step back a little bit, maybe take the evening off.
Yeah.
Don't do anything, go hang out with my kids or whatever. Cause that's always like, just brings everything anxiety down. Right.
Totally.
I can just forget it, like be a kid, right? I can play Nintendo with my son or just hang out and chill or play basketball or whatever,
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of like saying, just go do something else. Right.
Yeah.
Sort of get your mind out of that rut that it's in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really easy to get caught up in feelings because it's a literal physiological response that it's kind of like a scab. If you keep picking at it, or you're just, all you can feel is that, then it just perpetuates more of the same thing. But I really liked what you said about being able to detect it. I like that word, detect, because I think that our minds get out in front of us, right? And we're like, oh, I got to do this thing. But if you bring it back to, what you're experiencing here in your body, you start there and then you can proceed forward. You got to check in kind of all the time. And all the things you just said kind of reminded me of just sort of like basic meditation practice. Do you practice that?
I have off and on.
Yeah.
I don't currently. I've heard other artists say this, like their artwork when they're doing that is their meditation.
Yeah.
For me, I feel the same way. And when I have in the past, it has actually been very helpful,
Totally.
It could be additionally helpful for me. Now I just, you know what I mean? You're busy.
Yeah.
It's something that it goes back to the same thing. Like you have too many things, but in reality, if you feel like, you're sort of spinning out of control, or you're feeling very anxious, maybe that is the time to start sort of doing that.
Totally.
Taking the time, whether it's 5 or 10 minutes to do that. I feel like I haven't necessarily needed it.
Right.
For me, when I've used it, it's when I've sort of felt really bad.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I need to try to do anything I can do to get out of this.
Yeah.
And it's definitely helped.
Sure.
I'm not like a meditation guru or anything. I've just used like the Headspace app,
Yeah.
which is pretty simple and it's really helpful in sort of teaching you how to just sort of sit, and listen to your breath, for 10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. Love it. So I want to pivot real quick, and talk about video games, because on your bio, on your website at, what is it? mattmillsart.com, mattmillsart.com. On your bio there, you talk about working briefly with Disney on a video game. Can you describe what you were doing there? And maybe I want people, and maybe I'm kind of talking to like a former version of myself, but I want people to understand like the massive amount of collaboration and artistry that goes into making even one video game.
Yeah. So this we should start with sort of how I got there.
Yeah.
We sort of talked about going through college, just getting like a regular job and discovering creating artwork after work. Sort of what that led to was just me creating every day after work. I would come off of work, grab a 6-pack, sit down on my computer, just create all night. And sort of what that led to is me putting together this body of work. At that time, I was young and I didn't really understand what I was doing. I was just creating a lot of stuff. And having deviant art there is like, this is kind of your portfolio.
Totally.
I didn't realize that at the time. I was just like uploading artwork to this website, and what that led to was other people seeing it. And, somebody had contacted me from a local 3D users group here in Austin, after seeing my artwork on DeviantArt. And they're like, hey, we have this group for Maya users. We just get together at this pub and people show their art. We talk about 3D. And I was like, okay, that sounds rad. I'm going to go do that. And so I went. The first time I was there, they made me get up in front of everybody. And like, I had a USB drive with all my artwork on it. I plugged it in. I'm like fumbling with the computer up there, super nervous. There's like all these industry professionals there, like
wow.
3D artists and, texture painters and all sorts of things. I didn't really know it at the time, but these people, the people that had gotten up before me, they were making like legitimate video games, right? At big studios and stuff. And I'm just like this, 20-something-year-old kid making stuff, at night.
Yeah.
But what came out of that is, as we're walking out of that meeting, one of the guys comes up to me and was like, hey, you ever thought about working in video games? I was like, I hadn't honestly really thought about it up to that point. I was just creating shit, I was like, at that point, I didn't fully realize that it was somebody's job to sit there and make this video game.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It sounds weird now, but at the time, I'd played video games for years and years, right? It never really clicked to me that there was a whole office full of people sitting there putting this entire thing together. A video game is basically software, right?
Sure.
But there's so many aspects to it. So basically what happened is, I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Gave him my email address. A couple of days later, I get an email from HR lady at a local studio here in Austin, a video game studio. At the time, it was called Junction Point. It was run by a guy named Warren Spector, who is pretty big in sort of the video game industry. Made some classic games like Deus Ex, wing commander. And so he had started a small studio here in Austin, that ended up being acquired by Disney to make a Disney video game. So apparently Warren was really big into Disney, has like tons of Disney memorabilia, grown up loving Disney. And so he had pitched them with this video game about Mickey, who goes into a wasteland, basically a land of discarded Disney rides, discarded Disney characters. It was all like melted and painted and sort of like steampunky.
Nice.
And so they called me in for an interview. And it was kind of surreal at the time, you know, walking in and sort of seeing. It was like in this very just random office building out in North Austin, like nothing fancy. There was like 20 people sort of crammed into this office, just sitting there. It was all dark, like all the lights are off. And I walk in, they sit me in this like tiny conference room, and I'm sitting there sort of feeling way out of place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just this guy making art sort of in the evenings. I went to school to be a programmer, and but it's Disney, you know, and I'm like, I cannot pass this up. So I go in and, you know, they look through all my stuff, and sort of at the end, like, you know, we don't really have any art positions for you right now, because they were still like very small. So there was like 20 people there. Like, oh, we like you. We like what you're creating. And you have all of this you have this skill set, you know, that's very valuable, right? Creating, you know, software. And, you know, back then I was doing a lot of websites, right? Doing WordPress and Flash websites. So I had pretty good background in that. So that was kind of my day job. And so they offered me a position sort of in their IT department to come in, rebuild their website, design their logo, just do stuff like that.
Right.
With the option to move into an artist role, right? That was sort of the handshake deal, right? I should have gotten that in writing. But,
for sure. How old were you at this point?
Man, I was maybe like 28.
Yeah.
Maybe a little younger. And so, I took the job. You know, I was like, I can't pass this up. You know, this is almost too good to be true. And so I get there, and you know, they're working on this game called Epic Mickey. I kind of described it just a second ago, but it's like this big sort of like Mickey finds his like long lost brother, Oswald, and you know, there's this dystopian like Disney world where Mickey has a paintbrush where he like flings paint on things to sort of make them appear or bring them back to life, right? Sounds crazy, but like I walked into that office and there was paintings and sketches all over the walls. They have concept artists there, guys that are using pencils. Like you wouldn't necessarily think that, you know, the artists for video games would just be using like traditional tools to sort of make the concepts for these. But a lot of these guys were just sort of using those because that was sort of how they could like get into the flow, right? Just take out a pencil and just like sketch this crazy, you know, basically level. They would take Mickey and sort of put him in these crazy places and design all the characters and worlds. So sort of leads into what your question, where they have like concept artists there, the guys who just paint. Either it's mostly digital now, right? They have like their big Cintiqs, where in Photoshop they sort of paint out these just amazing worlds. I mean, it comes back to like your painting that you did for me. It's stuff like that, you know.
Nice.
They create sort of the vibe of a level. Imagine your character sort of walking into a level and they just see this huge expanse. So you can think like Disney, color everywhere, you know, just crazy splashes of paint. And it's pretty insane sort of the stuff that they were doing back then. You can look into like Jordan Lamar Wayne. He's one of the artists. AJ Trahan was another one that I can remember. Sam Yates. Like a lot of these guys were just creating insane like artwork. Sean Melkor, I think, is another one. I'm leaving out names here, but you guys can sort of look up the Epic Mickey concept artist.
So did the game get released?
Yeah, so you can.
Nice.
It was for the Nintendo Wii. It's called Epic Mickey, and then there's an Epic Mickey 2 that we did before they shut the studio down after the second one. But yeah, it's like those concept artists basically create sort of the visual world,
right?
And then you have like the 3D modelers who take that picture and make 3D models out of that. You have guys who just like paint the textures. They'll take those raw 3D models and just paint the textures, like hand paint, in Photoshop, all the textures for these things.
Wow.
Put them together. Character artists, right? The guys who have to animate these and rig all of the 3D models that move around. Programmers, like there's incredibly talented programmers like in video games, like people that like smarter than I have ever. People that like some of the smartest people I've talked to are some of these programmers for video games, because if you think about all the things that they have to do in a video game, like all of that has been programmed.
Right. Like the if X, then Y or Z, and then if Z, kind of like that.
Yep.
Probability tree or whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. Yeah. So just extremely complex programming, and there's designers who take all of that stuff and like put them in the game engine, right? And say like, when somebody walks here, trigger this thing to happen.
Yeah.
There's UI artists, people who just do like the buttons that you click on, right, to get to the menus and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. The audio guys, people have to make. This game had amazing like sound. Matt Pearsall is sort of it does a lot of the audio for some of these like massive video games, and sort of he worked on that. There's a bunch of other audio guys, Bill Munyon, I think was another one, who did a lot of this audio work that goes with all of that, right? And then there's all sorts of other people, right, at the studio, like me, tech guys. I was making websites. I was making tools for all the artists, right? When they create art, it has to go into like a source control thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm like writing scripts for all of that, as well as like we had a very small like IT team. There's like basically two of us for a studio that grew up to like over 200 people, I think.
Wow.
So it's kind of, it's like a startup, like you're doing everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like there late at night, taking people's computers off the racks and like fixing them and, giving them additional hardware. We had like producers there, the people who just like try to make sure everything gets done on time in the right order.
Yeah.
Right. So there's all sorts of like management that has to go into this. And with video games, there's a release date, right?
Yeah. So big deadline.
Yeah. And so that leads to a lot of, and this is sort of one of the downsides that I really was kind of eye-opening to me, right? Not just the amount of talent that is in these studios and the amount of work that goes into video games.
Yeah.
The amount of work leads to like long hours, right?
Sure.
So, and with these deadlines, it's like when things are coming up, they call it crunch time in video games, where, we had days where people were working, pretty much all day. I don't know, 18 hours or whatever, they were there into the wee hours of the morning, working. And, that is one of the downsides to sort of being in that industry. There are places where it's better.
Yeah.
And places where it's worse, right? It sort of depends on where you're at. I went to another studio after sort of Disney, the studio was shut down, called Certain Affinity, which is an independent game developer here in Austin. And they had it seemed like they had a lot of that sort of figured out, like the production timelines and all this stuff, where there was a lot less of that sort of severe crunching.
Yeah.
Highly talented people, putting things, sort of doing them in the right order, good management, right? Like Max Hoberman was the head of that studio. He was one of the original designers on the Halo games.
Oh, is he? What's he got? Does he have an Instagram? Is he like a concept artist or no?
No,
Okay.
no, Max is not.
Okay.
He's more of like a designer.
There's somebody on Instagram called like. The reason I thought of this is I think they sort of have similar sounding names, but like I can't. I'm gonna mess it up, but it's like Hobarth or something like that. Anyway,
Sparth, maybe.
Sparth, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
he is an amazing artist.
Yes, Sparth. Thank you.
Concept artist.
Saved my ass there. Sometimes you just start talking, and you don't know where you're going, and you're just like, I'm gonna throw out a sound real quick.
That's what I'm here for. I'm here to catch those sounds. But yeah, I mean, video games, man, that is like amazingly inspiring as far as like the people that I met during that period in my life. Like it sort of just showed me like the amount of talent that is out there. And that's honestly, this is sort of the point in my career that I tend to go back on with regret now, sort of not going into that artist role. Right.
Yeah.
Cause I did have options to do that at times, I probably could have done that, but, and this, maybe we should discuss this because I think maybe a lot of people go through this as well. Like making that decision to do what you really are into or are passionate about, right? Whether that's art or whatever, or sort of take like a safer path.
Yeah.
Right? And for me at that time, once I saw sort of all of that, sort of like the downsides, right? The crunch time, like
the stress, the no sleep,
lots of stress, people getting divorced and just all this like crazy stuff. I'm like, man. And this is like when I just gotten married, right? We're about to have a kid. Like we had my daughter while I was working at Disney, and like her name's in the credits. They did like an Epic Mickey sort of babies section in the credits. And so people who had babies during then, like their kids got their names in there.
Oh, nice.
Which is pretty awesome, honestly.
Yeah. Sweet.
But yeah, it was like a weird time for me. Like when you have kids, it's like, it's almost like a weight, you feel like, and I have this responsibility now. And for me, it just made more sense. Right. I had a good background in tech already, I love sort of working at the video game studio. It was more the people, right? Not necessarily sort of what I was doing.
Yeah.
Cause I was, working on IT stuff and building websites.
Yeah.
Nothing hugely exciting. Right. But, at that time it was like, it seemed like the right choice,
Yeah.
I'm having a family, there's this kind of, an artist typically don't get paid a lot. You know what I mean?
It's true.
It's just how it is, however unfortunate that is. I think that's incredibly backwards in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I think if you're talented enough and you put in hard enough work, and those are two big ifs, by the way, you'll go, you may go a while without getting paid enough, and then you get paid just enough, and then like right now I'm maybe a little bit past just enough, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm living like pretty comfortably, like life's pretty great right now, but I definitely went through years where financially I just ate shit, dude, like and I like quit my menial job like way too early, and but kind of getting back to what you were talking about, like you said you sort of regret not taking that or going for that artist role in maybe the video game industry or designing stuff for video games. I think there's pros and cons to that. You know what I mean? Like there's something to be said about making art just for you. You know what I mean? That makes it a lot more pure, a lot more enjoyable, I think. If you're not having to worry about like, will this sell? I think that takes the pressure off of you, and you're able to just create something that will sell, which is such a weird paradox, right? Like, and I mean, I don't know how I do it, but I do some sort of mental gymnastics, and I'm like, I don't care if this sells, and that's my trick, which I can't explain, but I have been in the past caught up in like, oh, like I have to pay my bills with this painting that's incomplete right now. And so I need to either rush it or do something that's not natural to me. And so therefore it comes off as kind of, like you can get really in your head about all this stuff is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And when I say I regret, it's that sort of being in my own head thing, right?
Sure. Yeah.
The days that I'm sort of just sitting at my computer, fixing bugs, like I work for a very large corporation. I work on a application that processes billions of dollars worth of, product a year.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very high impact job, stressful. And so when I have bad days, those are the days where I sort of go back and like, man, would this be better if I was just sitting, working on a video game, with cool people? But to your point, there's that other side, right? It's like the devil's advocate that for me is been a balancing act.
Totally.
And maybe that's why it's worked for me because, there's always that struggle, because I have my day job. Sometimes I get stressed.
Yeah. To
your point, I can go in the evening, just make something.
Right.
And I don't do a lot of client work anymore because of that.
Yeah.
Because there are requirements, like they want what they want, not necessarily what I want to make. Right.
Yeah.
And with that little amount of time I have to be very protective of that. And so what's sort of come out of that is where I just make what I want to make, I want to make something cool, what I love, what I like. Turns out other people like that. I've sold, over 400 pieces of, artwork. Like that's no number to sort of shake a stick at. Right.
Right.
Like, that's a lot of
awesome.
artwork that,
yeah,
that I wasn't necessarily expecting, right, to happen. But I think that comes out of just sort of making what you want to make, right?
Absolutely.
Just like putting all of yourself into it, like we discussed before, like all of your experiences over time, your interests, the things that you like, and just putting it out there. Mm-hmm. And it sort of draws other people in that are into those same things.
Exactly.
If you look at the people that are following me on Instagram or Twitter, it's like all people that I would just hang out with. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And so I think sort of if you're creating something that is like pure and is sort of who you are, it attracts people that are like you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And, kind of to circle back to the point about keeping the artwork or the process of making art pure, I think I just want to put this little disclaimer in here. I think it's like everybody's situation is so completely unique that whoever's listening to this, if you're like, oh, I resonate with that because this, and this, it's like you have to just make the decision based on your own unique situation, like you did, and like I have, and like any artist will. And I think the takeaway there is that you're never gonna have a frictionless life just because you decide to do a thing that you love, right? Whether it's for like professionally or as like, I mean, I consider you a professional artist, you know what I mean? Even though it's not your full-time job, big air quotes there. And so like whether you have declared like you're a professional artist or that it's just something on the side that you do for fun, like it'll help you in a lot of ways, but you can't expect like your troubles to be over just because you're out there like pushing colors around on a canvas or a digital screen. So yeah, I just wanted
Yeah.
to get that in there.
Oh, absolutely. And this is sort of one of the reasons I like don't give a lot of advice, right? Because everyone's situation is so different, right?
Yeah.
What I went through to get to where I am is vastly different from what other people are going through or have gone through. I think by telling my story, it could be useful for people to sort of pick pieces out of that.
Totally.
But like if you go on Twitter, people are always sort of posting, like you should do this or do this, don't do that, right?
Yeah, the self-help industry is pretty huge.
Yeah, and I think it's, some of that could be good if it inspires you, but it can
Right.
also be, pretty bad for some people, right? Because
Yeah.
they see these things and they're like, man, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Am I, living a shitty life? It makes you sort of question yourself, right?
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely, everyone's situation is, vastly different.
Yeah.
And, even my own situation, like you can't sort of sit back and think, man, my life would be totally different if I had done that, right?
Right.
If I had become a 3D artist at Video Game Studio, you have no idea what that would have done, right?
Right.
Like you can't sort of sit back and have regret on that situation, right?
Totally.
It got me to where I am. I can sort of use that.
Yeah.
And I do sometimes where, you can use that as fuel in the future, like if you have regret about this thing, well, just keep making art, right?
Totally.
Keep creating things, do something a little differently, or just keep going, right? Without sort of dwelling on that situation. And that comes with age, I think, as well. That's one thing that I've just recently sort of come to understand. There used to be a lot of friction there, right? Where I was like, man, I really wonder what would happen if I had done that. But the other thing is like, it's never too late, right?
Totally.
If there's something in your, for me, this is one of the things that I'm sort of going through now. It's like, I've had this long career in like software.
Yeah.
The entire time I've been, kind of making art just on the side. There've been periods where I've stopped, for years, a couple of years here and there, but really it's just a matter of, sort of just keeping at it, right? Doing what you like. And then just over time, what I'm noticing now is like, that's opening up other doors for me, right?
Yeah.
By posting my artwork that I like, this introduced me into a whole world of other people. Like I have a business partner, Mike McKinney, who is my partner in ArtGrab.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you about ArtGrab for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Let's jump into that.
Yeah. So I guess tell people about ArtGrab and talk about licensing art. And I mean, for me even as well, but for people listening, I only know a slight bit about licensing, but I know that it's just like the way if you want to kind of have like some supplemental income coming in.
Yeah. So kind of back to where I was going with that, I think, posting my artwork sort of introduced me to these other people. And it also showed me that there were people interested in purchasing my artwork.
Yeah.
And sort of what I was noticing is that these people were using it for album covers. The majority of them were, at least.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time I put a section on my website where people could just download the high resolution digital file. And I would create a license for them that would give them the rights to use that artwork as their album cover, right?
Yeah.
Because people can't just go to Instagram, download the artwork on there, right? There are copyright laws and all sorts of things, right? It's not legal, right?
Right.
People may do it. That's a whole nother story, but it's definitely not legal. And so once I started doing that, people started purchasing artwork off my website. And then, just through people that I was connected with on Instagram, other artists, right? Your internet friends, right? People like I never talked to you before, but
Right.
we sort of know each other. We know each other's artwork. I feel like you kind of know that person.
Yeah.
Well, there's this sort of like you have your crew or whatever on Instagram, people that always comment on your stuff and hype you up. And a couple of them sent me messages about this new website called ArtGrab. And they were looking for artists to sort of come on board, sort of help get that going. One of those was, his name is Taylene, Jeffrey Thielen. He's another digital artist.
Yeah.
You guys can look him up on Instagram. And Matt Andres, who's a badass photographer. They had both hit me up and say, hey, you should talk to Mike McKinney. He's got this website called ArtGrab, where we're sort of selling or licensing our artwork, for use as license cover or album covers or whatever. Mike goes by The Real Theory on Instagram. Check him out. He's got like badass artwork as well.
Shouts.
Yeah. And so DM'd with him a bit, got on a call, kind of hit it off. We're on the same page. I was already sort of selling my artwork, licensing my artwork on my own website. He had just started this ArtGrab business. And so sort of got together, discussed things, and they brought me on board there. And ArtGrab is owned by 18 artists. So it's artist owned.
Nice.
We all have a percentage in the company, some more, some less, based on sort of like their involvement in it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the initial artists just sort of fronted artwork to seed the platform with artwork. Myself, I'm now the CTO of the company, which means.
Oh, go ahead. You're going to explain.
Yeah. So that's like, if you're in the startup world or tech world, CTO, you're familiar with that, but it's basically a chief technology officer.
Cool.
And in a small company like this, that means I do everything.
Yeah.
I do all the programming. I run all the databases. I run, all of our platform on AWS, hook up with all of our third-party APIs. I basically build out the entire software that runs ArtGrab.
Nice.
And so I'm also a contributor, right? I put my artwork there daily for people to license it. And so basically what ArtGrab is, it's a website where anyone can go there. Artists go there and upload their artwork. So they have a page. Every artist has a page there. We can go look at their artwork. And then any customers, people who need album artwork, they want like an exclusive print. Like you can download this artwork. You're the only person that gets it. You can print it out. People use it for like printing clothing. There's all sorts of uses that you can sort of use this. Like once you have a license to use something, you can sort of use it for whatever you want.
Right.
I'm not a lawyer. There are very sort of deep legal terms for these things.
Yeah.
For us, we tried to make it initially sort of like what we're doing right now is it's an exclusive license, meaning whoever purchases that license can kind of use it for whatever they want.
Yeah.
There are other terms, and we may get into this later with ArtGrab, but having different license price points for what you can do with it, right? Like if you only want to pay a certain amount to use it for album artwork, you can do that. But if you want to use it for printing T-shirts, you got to pay another fee on top of that, or a recurring fee or something like that. It can get very complex.
For sure.
And so what we've done initially is just made it as simple as possible to sort of see if the idea took off and people were interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out they are. And, over the past years, we've been growing ArtGrab quite a bit. We have, over 3,000 artists have uploaded artwork on ArtGrab. These are mostly digital artists, right? People who work kind of how we do. These are people that we met on Instagram over the past 5 or 6 years who were just doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They all had day jobs or whatever. They were just making the art that they wanted to make. They didn't really have anywhere to sell it,
Yeah.
and there was this, from me doing client work with musicians and licensing my own artwork to musicians, it felt just like a perfect match, right? These two things, there's demand on this side. We know all these artists. We can sort of bring the supply from this side, pull those things together, and it sort of fit. And so that's sort of how we've grown it organically over the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Just finding badass artists, people like ourselves, and sort of using our entire followings, right? We all sort of retweet and share each other's artwork. And that sort of gets it out there in front of other people, whoever potential customers are, musicians right now is, they're buying a lot of this artwork for album covers, EP covers.
Right.
So like we don't do any real marketing. It's all just us sharing our artwork out there, right? The artwork is the vehicle, for us to sort of get business for ArtGrab, which is pretty cool,
Nice.
So
yeah, sweet. So yeah, that reminds me, I mean, like, okay, so the whole licensing thing is such a brilliant way, I think, for artists to make money, right? And I feel like a lot of artists, myself included, I haven't really tried or looked into it all that much, but to me it sounds like you make the art one time, and with your all's website, which I think is really brilliant. I don't know if there are any other sites like that out there, but you make the art one time and you put it up and people can pay you just to use it. I have so many questions, but how did you I guess were you exploring licensing before this? I mean you said you had worked with some like music clients, but this seems like, so can you license one piece of artwork to multiple different people or entities?
So in general, you can. On ArtGrab, our model is more exclusive. So once somebody licenses that artwork, nobody else can license that artwork.
Okay. Nice.
So imagine, like, for album artwork, typically you don't want somebody else to like have your same album artwork.
Right. Right. But if it were album artwork for one person and somebody else wanted to use it for something else, is that kosher, or is it just one off every single one?
So for us right now in ArtGrab, it's one off for everyone.
Okay, gotcha.
If you were like to do your own licensing, you could set it up sort of however you want, right? You as Andrew could, set something up on your website where there are different options, right? Somebody could want the exclusivity of this. They will pay more for that, right? But then they can put it on an album cover, put it on a t-shirt, put it on a poster, put it on whatever. And then, for us, ours is like straight dead simple right now, which is probably, it may be a little on the, I don't want to say bad side, but it's a little worse off for the artist here, because they're sort of getting one payment there.
Right.
I think sort of other ways to do this, or more complicated ways to do it, are to get recurring sort of income from, let's say somebody wants to put your artwork on t-shirts, right?
Yeah. You
can work in a deal where you get, 1% of every sale of the t-shirt, or whatever the deal is, right?
Right.
This is sort of where you get into all the nuanced pieces of this. But like I said, for us, because we're really just sort of testing this idea.
Sure.
And sort of everyone was telling us, sort of all of our connections on the music side, this is sort of what drove our model. They wanted artwork that was affordable. They wanted, to be able to use it for an album cover, for merchandise, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these are independent musicians. Like, I think that's something that's pretty cool. a lot of the people that are using this artwork, they're not big musicians. They don't have big budgets.
Right.
And so for us, we're kind of filling their need right now where they can get some really badass artwork affordably and then use it for whatever they need to use it. Down the line, I think if we expand like our offerings, right, we can improve this by, putting in stipulations where, the artist gets a certain amount of cut off of streams on Spotify or number of t-shirts that you sold or posters that you sold off that artwork. So there's a lot there, right?
Yeah.
A lot of different things that you can do. And we haven't really seen any good examples of that, and that's sort of why we created ArtGrab. There's like one or two other sites out there, I think, that are doing something kind of similar, but they're far more complex and far more expensive. And they're a little more out of reach for sort of like your independent musician types and, your smaller record labels.
Yeah. So that's a good PSA for anybody listening who might need album artwork. Go to artgrab.co.
.co. Yep.
.co. Okay. Awesome. Nice. It also reminds me, and this topic has come up for the last like 2 months now, but I mean, have you taken a look at the NFT space, or are you trying to get in on that? What's your overall take on that, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, we could go deep on this as far as thoughts go, right? I mean, it's so new and so hyped up right now. It's sort of hard to get a good feel on the validity of a lot of this, right? For me, coming at this from like a business perspective, like this seems pretty too good to be true almost, For me as a technologist, somebody who's a programmer and an artist, it's very intriguing to think about the potential uses of this technology. Regardless of sort of, there's a lot of like misinformation and people getting, upset about a lot of the NFT stuff right now.
Right.
Because it's so new and people don't really understand a lot of it. But I spent, the past couple of months researching, figuring out sort of how it's really working, trying to dig in as deep as I could, before sort of fully jumping in. I was actually minted my first NFT in 2019.
Nice.
So in March of 2019. And to me, there was something amazing about the idea of having that. To me, what really clicked was that sort of secondary sale model.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not perfect right now. And we can talk about that a little bit, but sort of just the idea. When I first heard about this, there were some sites back then that had contacted me. One is Known Origin. They're one of the NFT marketplaces right now. I hooked up with those guys and I put my first piece of artwork on there back in 2019. There was a couple other sites. I think one was Rare Art that I put artwork on. They're no longer around anymore. So I don't have history of that one, but Known Origin was around. They still are around.
Yeah.
Their platform is pretty awesome and it's very sort of art, they support artists very well, in my opinion. But so back in 2019, I sort of heard about this. It was still confusing. Like I had a lot of friends sort of in tech that were talking about Ethereum and Bitcoin and all of this back then. To me, I didn't understand it.
Right. Yeah.
I was just like, I don't have time for this. I don't care. It seems like a fad. You guys are going to lose all your money, whatever, I had friends like putting the vast majority of their income into Ethereum back then.
Yeah.
And for me, I was intrigued, right? Being an artist, sort of it paints this picture of, hey, you're going to put this artwork up here. Somebody's going to purchase it, but then somebody else is going to purchase it and you're going to get a cut of that forever, right? There's a history that you uploaded this artwork. sort of all tracked on the blockchain. Sort of the whole user experience of that was not great back then. It's still not great now, but
Yeah.
just figuring out like how to get a wallet, how do I get Ethereum? How do I get Ethereum into my wallet? How do I sign up for this site?
Yeah.
Like I'm a pretty technical person. And if it took me, if I was struggling with that, I couldn't imagine anyone else being able to do that.
Yeah.
And like a normal person, right? And at the time I was just like, there's no way anyone is ever going to do this and buy any artwork like this. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually wrote a blog post back in 2019 about how hyped I was about this.
Yeah.
And I like wrote out this whole thing about like how I was going to create one artwork that would get unlocked with a new artwork. So anytime it got purchased, the new artwork would be unlocked.
Nice.
And it would sort of drive this whole thing of me like being able to quit my corporate job because I'm getting all of this like residual income. And like, that's sort of the hype I think now that people are buying into,
Yeah.
and it is truly exciting,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, definitely.
digital artists haven't really had that. That's one of the things that led us to create ArtGrab, because at the time we didn't really have any good sources to sell our artwork.
Right.
You can sell prints, but I think everyone knows prints are super hard, right? It's
Yeah.
hard to make any money. It's just not a good, it's not a good route. I mean, it hasn't been a good route for me or anyone that I know. You can get some good money from it, but
Yeah.
it's very inconsistent, I found,
Yeah, I think it's more of an in-person thing. Like trying to sell a print online, I've found somewhat difficult, depending on, I guess, a lot of different things, but way easier for me in person for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do with, not to sidetrack us too much here, but a lot of it has to do with like, usually when I'm selling prints in person, it's at a concert or a festival or something with like music and an atmosphere, and it's the experience of like picking this piece of artwork up and being like, I'm taking it home,
Yes.
But yeah, continue. So you guys started ArtGrab kind of with that in mind.
So this was kind of shortly after that, I got introduced to Mike, and I sort of went off and did the ArtGrab thing. I just forgot about like crypto art, NFTs, any of that stuff. And then that's like what I spent my time on. Like my free time, I was working on ArtGrab, building that out, connecting with other artists and sort of doing that, come, the end of 2000, shit hits the fan, right? Just explosion of like NFT and crypto art.
You mean 2020, right?
2020, yeah. What did I say?
You said 2000. I was like,
ooh, yeah. No, I go back that far. So yeah, 2020, you see this huge influx of sort of these platforms just taking off. To me, that is a direct correlation to the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum skyrocketing over 2020.
Yeah.
Because one of the problems I saw in 2019 was there's no money, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody was buying anything. So, I mean, people may have been. It just I didn't get deep enough into it to really see that. But you weren't seeing people buying things for millions of dollars that I'm aware of, at that time.
Also, there's something that I just thought about, like with crypto. There's obviously limited number of places to use it, right? Just as a transactional thing in place of, the US dollar or whatever currency. And there's a limit to how much you can take out per day. And when you do take it out of your crypto wallet, that's when you get taxed on it. So I think like, you were talking about the big skyrocket in Ethereum and Bitcoin, and all of a sudden, a lot of these people holding a lot of those coins are like, I have more money than I literally know what to do with. And you can't discount that as a factor in the whole ecosystem of what's going on there.
I think it's a big factor. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like, put this down at all, but I don't
Sure.
think this would be happening if the crypto markets did not sort of skyrocket last year.
Yeah.
I think all the artists, in the community sort of like to think that, hey, we're supporting artists and, we're bringing, smaller artists up, and they are absolutely for sure. That's one of the shining things that's come out of this.
Yeah.
Is just sort of brought all these artists together again.
Yeah.
To be excited about something, which has been, to me, the really amazing part of that. Aside from, artists making money or any of that, right? It's just the connection and the community aspect of it.
Totally.
So yeah, it's been super eye-opening, right? And for us, from a business sense, it's like, man, do we get into this? Or, it's like, you're sort of like confused, right? It's like such a tidal wave of just information coming in, and like, wow, people are putting up this much, amount of money,
right,
for digital artwork, right? So, one of our business goals is, to be able to support artists, right? So how can we best support artists? So we are definitely sort of in development on things like crypto, in the blockchain sort of sphere right now. Can't really talk too much about that, of course.
For sure.
We're definitely sort of looking at it from a lot of different angles. There are already marketplaces out there. So I don't think that is like a very good model at this point. Like, we want to sort of look at it from a different point of view and sort of bring something different to the table with a long-term view on like supporting artists, right? Because the two things are kind of different, like licensing artwork versus the NFT collectible world.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because one is more like a B2B where, somebody's buying this artwork to use for like a musician's kind of running a business, right?
Oh, for sure.
And, collectors are just sort of collecting especially sort of in the crypto world, they're collecting to either flip that, right, and make money, which is one of the less
cool,
appealing aspects of it to me. When you see that, like, I mean, I'm all for people making money, right? But sort of seeing like people buy people and then they get it for whatever, like $100, and then they sell it for, $500,000, right? That in itself is amazing. What I mean? And an amazing opportunity for somebody. But like from the artistic standpoint, it's sort of bringing like some of the worst aspects of crypto into the art world. I'm guessing the traditional art world may be similar. I don't know enough about it but it seems to me that people aren't necessarily flipping artwork a lot.
Right.
Or not that I've seen.
Right.
It's more collecting to support that artist, right? Or maybe it is an investment as well. Like different aspects, I guess.
From my limited perspective, like, it does happen, but it's not like the technology makes that phenomenon, like it puts it on steroids, because it's like grab, flip, 10 seconds, whereas like a collector may see an artist who's like up and coming and they're like, how much is that? $2,000. Yeah, I bet, like, you're doing things like, I bet in 5 to 10 years I could flip it for 20, 50, whatever. But it's not like, ooh, I'm going to snatch up this, $100 Beeple edition of whatever, and then turn around and post it on in my wallet for sale for $500,000. And, there's a lot of fuckery that can go down in between all that, I suppose. But it's, again, like you were saying, it's also great. We can't overlook like the pros to all this too, because in a situation like that, like Beeple makes the $100 or whoever, whoever makes the $100 on their edition of whatever image online, and they still get 10%. So if someone sells it for a ridiculous amount, what is that? Is that $5,000 or $50,000? I mean, that's a good chunk. That's great. That's great for the artist. And you definitely don't see that in the traditional art world, unfortunately.
Yep.
No one's like, yo, I'm going to hook you up because, like you made this and I only bought it for $2,000 and I flipped it for 20. Like no one's doing that. So yeah, that's like you were saying too, that's definitely what had me hype the first few weeks. And I kind of see the hype settling down, and like it's just like anything that has hype around it. If the hype is valid, there'll be the craziness and the churn and all that, and then things will settle down a little bit, and the real players in the game will stick around, and they're there for the long haul. And usually that's like serious artists, right? In this case, that's what that is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm kind of, I'd like to get into it, but also I'm not a digital artist, and I don't want to just slap a still JPEG up there and be like, $4,000. Come on, let's go.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely exciting, and it can be confusing and scary. And, it can be very triggering for some people. There's a lot of talk about like environmental concerns and, being a technologist as well as an artist, I see, and this is one of the things that I really wanted to look into when I started looking into this, looking at the technology and sort of what it was doing. And a lot of this stuff, like I said, is fairly new technology, right? It's being used in different ways now, and it's constantly evolving. Like I've been in software for such a long time that, my day job, I worked with JavaScript a lot and build, applications with React, and like these libraries and these languages are just continuously evolving. Same thing with sort of like the technology around blockchain. It's very new. There's constant development on it.
Mm-hmm.
So things break or things are working on as expected sometimes. So if you're in the space, you kind of got to like be mindful of that, right? Things aren't going to work all the time. As well as, the environmental concern was like one of the things that I didn't really think about initially.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started seeing people talking about it, I was like, okay, yeah, maybe this is a problem. And then sort of looking into it more, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's lots of misunderstanding of like what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some valid concerns for sure,
right,
with like mining of these, all the mining concerns of like, even if you look at like cities where Bitcoin miners used to be, right? They went in, they ate up all the energy, when it was low cost. But then once energy costs went up, they sort of moved and left like, pieces of towns just like in ruins or whatever.
Yeah.
So like, I think people definitely need to sort of think about that somewhat. But like I said, this constantly evolving where, people talk about Ethereum and Ethereum 2 and what it's going to do to, sort of the way these transactions are calculated.
Yeah.
And that's definitely going to make things much better. It's not quite there yet, but I think, it's, like I said, it's constantly evolving. So there are already blockchains that are sort of on what we call the proof of stake.
A good example is Tezos for anyone listening.
Oh, yes.
I think this will be the third episode in a row once I release it, or maybe the second in a row that I talk about Tezos and Hicat Nunc as a platform, and Calamint.io. Check those out if you're looking for a more green and sustainable blockchain technology in proof of stake.
Yeah, and I actually just got into Hicat Nunc's, I don't know, maybe it was like a week or two ago, and started putting animations on there, things that I had never released before. just
Nice.
scraps of things that I had done for like concert visuals, just things like laying around, right? And I sort of put them together like a nice GIF or a little MPEG, sort of put them on there. And it was more initially like for research, for my own research, to sort of look into this and see like what's going on here. Is this a different sort of way? Like, how are they handling these things?
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a community in its own right there, and to me, that feels much more crypto arty than like Super Rare or Nifty Gateway.
Right.
This feels like what I would expect, crypto art to feel like the UI is like broken half the time. The GIFs aren't loading because they're like 10 megabytes, and half the time your transactions get backtracked, and but that goes back to like, this is such a new technology.
Sure.
But to me, that's what makes it fun, right?
Yeah.
Sort of being there in the beginning, seeing all these things before they really blow up. But I think what Hikette Nuts is really showing is that, and this is one of the very interesting things that I found, artists are buying other artists' artwork.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that was pretty badass to see. You see like on the Ethereum side, you see some of these artists getting $4,000, $10,000, $80,000, $100,000, millions of dollars for an animation or for a collection of animations or whatever. And then those artists going back and sort of buying artwork from other artists, right?
Yeah.
And to me, this is what fed the entire hype cycle, right?
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
the money is just like flowing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a washing machine right now, I don't want to go into like money laundering too much,
yeah, I was just saying more ways than one.
But yeah, the money is just like transferring hands so quickly, right? It's almost like, the bigger artists are buying smaller artists are buying all their friends' artwork.
Yeah.
And on the Ethereum side, the prices have been way inflated, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of, and the gas fees are, have been astronomical,
Yeah.
like $100 for a transaction. I mean, come on.
Yeah. It's so weird. Maybe getting back to the kind of like buggy aspect of all the new technology is like, I bought one NFT so far. And when I went to buy it the first time, the gas fee was more than what the art costs. And I was like, what the fuck? And so I reloaded and waited. And then it was like $7. And so I'm like, okay, I hope people aren't just, I guess if you have enough Ethereum, you can just kind of click through and you're like, yep, okay, I'm going to need it now. But I don't, to be honest, I don't understand all the gas fee stuff. I guess there's like a power surge at that moment. They're like, oh man, we're going to need a lot of money if you want to buy it right this second. But it was literally 20, 30 seconds later, and then the gas fee went right down. So I don't understand how that works. Are you privy to that at all?
Yeah, it's I don't want to go like describe all the technical details, but basically on Ethereum side right now, the gas fee is to pay for the miners that do the calculations on your transaction.
Sure.
So there's like some warehouse somewhere that has a bunch of like computers in it that is, crunching all the numbers for this transaction, because every transaction on the blockchain gets stored somewhere.
For sure.
Right. They have to calculate it and they have to store it. So that calculation costs electricity, right? You have to run the server or whatever, the GPU or whatever's running it. So in order for the miner, whoever's running all those computers, to make money, they need to get a cut of that transaction, right? So the gas fee goes to that miner.
I just don't understand why, in that specific instance that I just described, like why it was astronomical 1 second and then like the next it dropped. And I don't know.
To me, I've actually seen that. It's like, it's the technology, it's like the applications themselves really that can cause this. So if you use MetaMask, basically MetaMask is like calling an API somewhere to get that gas fee to calculate it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a bug in the software that generates that. Maybe you just needed to refresh it, right? Because it had cached some number in there that was incorrect from a previous transaction.
Yeah.
Software is is very delicate,
For sure. Yeah.
and it can do some weird things.
Yeah.
Just like anything, right?
Yeah.
You're like, if your computer's not working, you power it off and power it back on,
Yeah.
restart it,
Yeah.
and it just works. So there's
Nice.
a lot of that weirdness, going on, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
But HickEckNuts, to me, if you just want to play around like with blockchain and crypto art, that's sort of
That's
a
the
fun
spot.
place to do it for not much.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people are buying Ethereum with their own money right now, and putting thousands of dollars of their own money into it and then purchasing crypto art with it. Like I said before, I think a lot of the money is getting churned around,
Yeah. Yeah, I do
from
too.
like big players pushing it down. But HickEckNuts is like, you can go put like $100 down, $50 down.
Yeah.
And you get transactions are less than $1. It's like a few cents or even less than a few cents
Mm-hmm.
to make transactions there. And then the artwork as well, like a lot of the artists will put up like editions of 10 for, for very cheap, like $5, $10, $20.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that, to me, that's the fun part, where you can actually collect some of this artwork from these artists for, relatively cheap right now.
Yeah.
That may go up, once more people start, getting into it. But
Yeah.
for right now, it feels, really, really cool.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing about about Tezos too, is that it's at a relatively low price right now, compared to like Ethereum or Bitcoin, or I mean even other coins that are in the $100 to $200 range, like Litecoin or whatever. So there's potential for growth if anybody is interested in that. So we'll wrap up here, man. I just wanted to ask you one last question. Do you have any big projects or dream projects that are coming up or that you would like to happen? You think about that at all, ever?
No, I think about that a lot. And I don't have anything in the pipeline right now, but this goes back to sort of reflecting on the things that you've done. And to me now it's sort of looking forward to things that I want to do. And, I had an interesting conversation with somebody not too long ago about like designing your life. And they were like, if you sort of begin with the end in mind, sort of look at your life sort of further down the road when you're 80 or 90, sort of think about the things that you would have wanted to have done during your lifetime, and sort of work your way back, right? Figure out, well, what are the steps that were, I would have taken to get there, right?
Totally.
And so that's sort of like the phase of my life that I'm in right now. Sort of like seeing, I don't want to say I'm in like a midlife crisis, but it feels like I'm sort of in like a transitionary phase where
Sure.
I've done a lot, like I've had a lot of success, and now it's sort of looking at what I want to do next. A lot of that has to do with like, for me, like having a business, a thing that I can work on. That is like Artcraft to me is ideal because I can work with artists, technology side of it as well. It like combine those things perfectly.
Yeah.
Right? But then I have like the artistic side as well, where I'm starting to get back into 3D, get more into like animation, motion graphics type stuff, so one of the things that I've always wanted to do is like make music videos, right?
Ooh, nice.
I grew up sort of right in MTV era where you'd see these videos. I mean, the ones that sort of stick in my mind are like the Tool videos.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like just this weirdest shit that you've never imagined before, right? And so I have a lot of things like short films that I have like documented just over the years, sort of sitting in Evernote right now. Just ideas of things that I would want to work on. And thinking about right now, sort of musicians that I could potentially pair up with, this goes kind of into the NFT thing too as well. Like there's a lot of musicians and artists teaming up now. So coming together to sort of build out, those longer, like short film type animations with my artwork, I think will really sort of combine like my love of music and the artwork together in like a very visually appealing, more than just like a static image.
Right.
So I feel like over the next, that's sort of the phase I'm going into now. I'm doing a lot of experimenting and sort of learning about ways to use Cinema 4D, After Effects to sort of create all of these crazy designs and animations similar to the artwork I create, right? To have that same energy and emotion coming out, to combine that with, to really combine that with music, not just me listening to it while I'm doing it, but sort of meld them together in more of a, like either a concert visual style or music video type style.
Yeah. And with the technology going at the rate it is, might even be a full virtual reality world at some point.
Absolutely. I mean, there's some artists sort of doing some really cool things like that right now.
Yeah.
Sort of getting into that, like we talked about Unreal before, Unreal Engine.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of opens up the door to sort of bring your 3D assets and your animations.
Yeah.
And then give that to other people to experience, right? Imagine a world that's got, amazing music sort of playing as you're flying through it, running around. You've got crazy like colors and visuals. It's like, a virtual psychedelic experience, right? Where you're kind of just seeing and hearing all of this, coming together in one sort of experience.
Yeah. Well, the future is definitely exciting, and thank you so much for your time and for your energy here today, Matt. Really enjoyed talking to you. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, man, this is amazing. Like I said, this is my first podcast, and it's sort of good to sort of get down and talk to you. We've been sort of following each other online, and I commissioned you for some artwork, and I really love your stuff. And one of the reasons sort of I've wanted to get some of your artwork on my wall is to support sort of this podcast.
Yeah,
because this has been one of the things that has been inspirational to me. When I was commuting to work, I would listen to the podcast. Just hear about when you and John started it, and I've got one of John's pieces right here as well.
Yeah.
So like for me, that's how I can support, other artists.
Yeah.
You guys are putting out this amazing sort of content for people, and, I'm able to support, you guys, like this, and it's been really awesome. So it's been a pleasure having, being on this podcast.
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, I appreciate you so much. And thank you for continuing to listen. And yeah, like I said, I'd be happy to have you back at some point. Let's stay in touch.
For sure, man.
Awesome, dude. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Matt Mills. You can tell people where they can find you real quick, and then we'll go ahead and stop recording.
So just Matt Mills Art on Instagram and Twitter, mattmillsart.com, on the web, and you can go to artgrab.co/mattmillsart to license any of my previous artwork.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and Matt, I'll see you next time.